now. Hello. Want to do an interview?
I would love to, actually.
I'm completely open, and I'm trying to test this different way of doing it with someone virtually interviewing you. I'm trying to practice this way of having conversation, and there's other people who are interested in trying to practice it too. And
I would love to.
Yeah, well, feel free to actually take my seat, actually.
Okay.
This is Jeff.
Hello. Huh?
Welcome. Take it away, Jeff.
Hello. Hey, I'm Jeff, and that's Nathan down here in the...
Yeah, I'm Nathan. Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Zeze.
Zeze, nice to meet you. So what are you doing out here today?
Well, it's finals week, and I'm kind of taking a break. I'm meeting some friends for lunch at 2:30 on the steps over there, so I've just kind of been walking around.
Okay. What are you studying?
I'm double majoring in psych and public affairs with a minor in education.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. So how you doing on your finals, you think?
Doing pretty well. I submitted my last couple papers yesterday, and tomorrow I have my last psych final for abnormal psychology, so that should be really fun. I just need to study for it, and I've had to write so many papers, so many words have come out of my brain in the last week, so just pushing through.
All right. Okay, Zeze. It's fantastic. So what Reed's doing here is he practices, and I'm kind of a bit of a practitioner myself, and so's Nathan, something called street epistemology, and we just like to talk to people about beliefs they may have and the reasons why they believe them to be true, and just have a conversation, basically. Just
I'd love to.
Try to understand, another person's point of view. And it can be about anything. It can be about politics. It can be about religion. It can be about the vaccine. It can be about burning sage in your house or ghosts. I mean, just some type of a belief that a person would hold that they may act on and in the real world. Have you got anything that you'd like to?
I saw on the topic paper over there that there's a topic of today for sex and gender. I think that sex and gender is like a topic that I'm very passionate about. I personally identify as like somewhat non-binary, and I do like they, them pronouns as well as she, her pronouns, and kind of exploring the binary that does exist within gender and trying to break that is something that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, that's the topic that I was gravitated towards. Okay,
so if I hear you saying that sex and gender are different concepts, is that what I'm hearing you say? Okay. How would you describe the fundamental differences between the two?
I believe sex is the sex you're... Like a common term, for example, that a lot of people use is like AFAB and AMAB, which means assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth. So like that's something that kind of distinguishes sex from gender. And gender is more of like a social construct that kind of has been put on us to kind of have to associate our genitalia with our gender identity, which isn't true, and it isn't necessarily true for everyone. And yes, it is true for a lot of people, but in reality, like, I feel like gender is such a large spectrum, and like we are kind of told to act a certain way based on the gender that we, were presumed at birth, when in reality, like, there's so many external causes that affect and, play around with that. Like, for example, for me, I think a lot of the reason I identify not completely with the female gender or like with the, being a woman is because of my own history and my own experiences and pressure to act a certain way growing up, and the way that my dad was about like clothing and being a woman and doing the things a woman needed to do versus, not being able to do the things a man could do. I grew up with two brothers and a dad who were pretty conservative, so like that kind of pushed me to start thinking about there's very few people who actually think about gender when they aren't, pushed or expected to think about gender, because it's not something we're expected to talk about or think about for ourselves, when in reality it's such a beautiful spectrum to explore.
Okay. So if I hear what you said, sex is what you're assigned at birth, your genitalia, right?
Yeah.
And gender is a fluid concept across a spectrum of what would I say? Spectrum of identity. Is that?
Yeah, it's gender expression, for example, is very different than gender identity, right? Like, just because you express or look a certain way doesn't mean that that's the gender that you are.
Okay. So gender expression and is different from gender identity. Is that correct? Okay. So think about. So are you saying that a person may express their sexuality or present themselves to people, and most people would assume that they are a male or a female, one of the other sexes, when in fact the reality of their identity could be anywhere along this spectrum. Is that fair?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I think it's necessary for us to normalize, like, the fact of bringing up your pronouns, like, just casually, like, hi, my name is Zeze and I go by they, she pronouns or whatever, just to normalize the fact of people who, you know, maybe don't feel like they're going to be discriminated against in an environment because people aren't talking about their pronouns. They're like, oh, I'm going to be misgendered, but I don't feel comfortable saying anything about it. So really normalizing that externally.
So in a social situation, perhaps you may feel awkward introducing yourself with the they pronoun. Okay. So how confident you bring out a scale of confidence we use, and sometimes you've talked about this scale or what's a good word? A spectrum of sexual identity, wherever that spectrum may be, and lots of fluidity there. If I were to ask you, 0 being I have nothing but questions that this spectrum exists, and 100 being I have all confidence this spectrum exists and it's true, where would you put your confidence level on that?
So my confidence level on whether or like on how confident I am that this spectrum does exist.
That is separate from being what you're assigned at birth, I guess. Yes.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
I think that there is overlap, and there's totally people who don't identify with anywhere along the spectrum except what they were like kind of defined as, you know, growing up. But regardless, I think it still exists, and I think it's really interesting to pose questions to cis people. So cis people are those who identify, you know, with what they were, told originally. So like really asking them, being like, hey, have you ever just like sat and thought about your gender? And just like being like how you experience it. Like, how do you experience your gender as like a, you know, cis white male, for example? And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have with people. I bring it up with my friends all the time because I'm one of the only like queer representations in my close friend group. And in like part of me is sad about it, but the rest of me is like, oh, I get to like talk to them about this and get them to finally start thinking about this stuff.
That's great. That's great. So you're 100% confident that this spectrum exists, which is separate. Is gender identity? Is it a real physical thing, or is it just something that a person feels in their and maybe it's their emotions and what they're thinking, or is it actually more than just a thought process?
I think what's really interesting about that question is that everything that we think is physically a part of us is also psychologically a part of us, because our brains are such insanely large, you know, pieces of muscle that are working so hard to kind of not only take our biology into account, but our environmental factors into account, right? And so like someone who for example, if I was born in a place that, you know, was very, not necessarily pressuring my gender and or actively affirming it or disproving it, I would act very differently than the way I act today. Like I might not say that I am non-binary because the external factors didn't affect me that way, but I think in my life, it's also those external factors. It's also not just the biology within me, but how my brain has processed that biology, how my brain has processed all these external situations, experiences, just my life, who has been around me, who I've, gravitated towards. That all affects how you view yourself.
Okay.
So I'd say it's a big combination of not just physical, genetics, but also incorporating that psychological, environmental factor into how you identify in terms of your gender or sexuality.
So, nature and nurture, is that what?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I think what I heard you saying there is that the whole idea of gender identity is tied to some extent, a physical thing, maybe hormones, or just, or
like you literally, it could be how I happen to have more testosterone than normal females would have, or stuff like that too. Like it always, it's just so much that comes into culmination.
All in the middle. Okay. And so it's that, along with the environment, the nurture, and what happens can lead a person down this spectrum. Then, right? So what's the main reason that you believe this spectrum exists for gender? I mean, if you're 100% confident, that's impressive to be 100%. So what would you say is the main thing that's convinced you that spectrum exists?
I think truly the main thing is that I've had so many conversations with so many different people, whether they, believe in the spectrum or don't. Like, I've really just talked to as many people as I can about gender identity and stuff. And I think maybe it's just like experiences I've heard. Like, you can't doubt what people are feeling, and when there's so much community around what these people are feeling, there's so much community I've found, so much community that I've seen other people find. I grew up with a couple transgender friends who were very close to me, and that also kind of helped me redefine what gender is in my head, right? Because at first, growing up, no one really questions gender because it's just pushed on you, right? And you're like, this is what I'm supposed to know, this is what I am, moving on. And then I started, being in environments and spaces that allowed conversation to not be dictated by the gender binary. And I think that is what kind of made me realize that, like, we did create gender. And also, for example, like Native American tribes, a lot of older Native American religions have third gender, or there's a really special name, I don't remember it now. Two-spirit, that's what it is. So, like, for example, the idea of two-spirit, that's a third gender that people completely understand. It's very similar to non-binary. It's also very different, and it's a lot more spiritual. But, like, looking through history, like, gender was never as stigmatized, I feel like, as it is today. Like, in a way, we think it's the opposite, but in my head, it's really, we've put so many barriers on how people can express gender, and there weren't those barriers earlier, and now people are being like, oh, well, I can negate them, and I can be who I want to be, and I feel comfortable.
So let me ask you a question. I want to take a little side journey. I want to get back, because you said a couple of things that are very interesting to me. Because I asked you what the main reason was you believe this spectrum exists, and you said some personal experiences, basically. I think, is that fair enough? Talking with people, and so if think about how to ask, I want to ask this next question. Do you think it's possible that there's a person that has had personal experiences that have reached the conclusion that this spectrum does not exist? Yeah?
I think, there are people, there's so many people I know who through their experiences would just, like, cannot internalize the fact that this spectrum exists because they never experienced it, right? And so when you take into, like, you have to have an open mind about this. For example, like, I'm definitely, like, I'm always going to listen to the viewpoints and opinions of other people who don't believe the spectrum exists, because I just want to talk to them about where they're coming from. Because in my head, like, there's no way it doesn't exist. But if there's someone who believes that, I want to know where they're coming from. Otherwise, I'm not going to like there's going to be no benefit anyway. There's just going to be more divide, more an us and them dynamic. And that's what really frustrates me about the world we're in today, is that we constantly divide each other into us and them, when in reality the first step to kind of bridging that gap in this like politically polarized world is listening to what the other side has to say and really trying to understand it, even if it's hard.
And that's one of the main reasons that Reed is out here doing this and that I do this, is to have conversations with people and try to understand the other person's point of view. It's not, I'm not trying to debate anyone. Reed's not trying to debate anyone. I'm not trying to change anybody's opinion. Just want to try to understand where this other person's coming from. Let me ask you a question. You talk quite a bit. You said a few things that are very interesting, that gender is kind of forced on us. Is that fair? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
Is it possible that there are some people that are born male, born female, that are just gender identity male and female, and nothing's forced on them? It's just who they are? Do those people exist? Okay.
I'm in the world that we live in today, there's definitely those people that exist, but I think that's even more caused because we're not brought up in a way that has us question our gender.
So you're saying if it was more socially acceptable to question your gender and live on the spectrum, then more people would not identify as cisgender, you think? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's been
at a certain... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
At a certain point, it's just... Have you even had that... Like, have you even learned about this information? Like, do you even know that there's a possibility for you to question your gender? Like, that's the main defining point, I think.
Okay. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciated this. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Not specifically. I'm just very excited that I've always been walking up and down like Bruinwalk and seeing you here sometimes, and it gets me so excited. I never have the time, but I'm glad I had the time today because these are the kind of conversations I love having. I want to work in policy work and related to like a bunch of different things, specifically like correctional education and stuff. And I think the only way we bridge the gap of so many of these hard conversations and actually working towards policy that's going to fix them is having conversations like these. So I'm thoroughly inspired by y'all's conversations with this. But yeah, thank you.
Get on YouTube and look up Street Epistemology. Reed is on there as Cordial Curiosity. There's a Street Epistemology channel. Nathan is on here. Nathan, I can't remember your channel. And I go by Honest Inquiry. And so, yeah, there's a whole community of people who do this thing where we just try to have conversations and understand one another.
Awesome, wonderful. I will definitely be looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you for the conversation, Zeze. It was really great. I really enjoyed it.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Awesome.
Okay, that's the first time I've done like the virtual version.
That was really awesome. That was really cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I can hear okay towards the middle. I mean, the beginning was a little hard, but then it fixed it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Feel free to take a puzzle piece since you have completed the conversation.
Oh my god, lovely. Let's do it yellow.
Stress ball is probably good for
the fun.
For this week.
Yeah. But I hope to see you out here again. Thank you so much. Bye.